Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. I am Brigadier General Michael Smith. I'm the U.S. Indo-Pacom J6. First of all, thank all of you for joining us for this fantastic conversation this afternoon. We have a lot of really important guests and partners. I'll hand this over to Captain Ron Ariano in a few minutes to moderate this effort. But again, thank you kindly. Aloha. Here we are. We're in Hawaii. We didn't force you to be here. It looks like everyone's happy to be here. So we'll get this started. But just a few atmospherics up front. So in US Indo-Pacom, when I got here a few months ago, I realized that there's a lot of cyberspace activities happening in our theater, not necessarily just within the DoD, but across the interagency and across the commercial sector with our various partners. So what I asked the team to do really a couple months ago was set up a network defense summit, which brought together over 50 of these partners from across our AOR. And what I really need to get to is synchronization, integration, and alignment of all those cyberspace activities. Because right now, from a US Indo-Pacom perspective, we have a very defined set of priorities, lines of efforts, and then those are to achieve a set list of operational outcomes. I honestly can't say that those are being achieved right now because there's no alignment. There's probably alignment in the background in some form or fashion at some level across these organizations. But again, we're just DoD. We also have other organizations that we can't dictate their priorities to them, but we would like for them to at least understand our thought process, our strategy in this theater, which is really to, first of all, deter aggression, second of all, respond to and prevent crisis, and lastly and most importantly, that we're always ready to prevail in conflict when necessary. So that's why this is very important. The transparency is very important, that we all understand the path that we're on and how do we align and support each other to create these efficiencies. So there's nobody here with bad intentions. Everyone here has a path given by their organization with the right intentions, with the right North Star to help defend our networks, our capabilities, and our services. But this is our first effort in really starting that conversation from our Network Defense Summit. I was going to hand this off to Ron, but I'll share a couple notes since I'm up here. Our next Network Defense Summit for US Indo-Pacom, that's all partners in the theater, DoD, interagency, commercial, will be March 2025. And at that event, we expect to pull in everyone, get a better appreciation for their organization's roadmaps and the alignment of their activities, offensive, defensive, and then just on-network, DoD-like type responsibilities. So that's our goal. I think we're going to achieve it. I think we're going to better support US Indo-Pacom's warfighting perspective from a joint force, and I think this is the right team to get that going. So without further ado, I would just like to introduce Captain Ron Ariano, and he will take it over from here. But before I do that, please give everyone up here a quick welcome. Thank you. All right, Ron, over to you.
Thank you, General. Hey, aloha, everybody, ladies and gentlemen and colleagues. My name is Captain Ron Ariano. So what I do in my day job, I'm the director of the Cyberspace Operations Integrated Planning Element at US Indo-Pacom. And in my other job, I'm also the US Cybercom Liaison Officer to US Indo-Pacom. So in a lot of ways, I straddle both combatant commanders and have unique insights into both. The primary mission, obviously, is to sort of integrate and create mutually beneficial wins and outcomes so that we as a joint force can fight better, maneuver better, and operate better together. So with that, I'd like the panelists, I'd like to thank them for participating today, and I would like to hand it over to them just to give a quick 2-minute introduction on themselves, where they come from, and where their organization really sits within the cyberspace ecosphere.
Aloha, everybody. My name is Jenilyn Labrenda. I'm the Cybersecurity Advisor under CISA, that's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I actually am physically located here in Guam, so I feel very at home here in Hawaii. I cover the territories, so that includes Guam, CNMI, and American Samoa, and right now also covering Hawaii as well. Our headquarters for Region 9 is located in Oakland, California, and I'm happy to be here, Ron. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Frank Pace. I'm the Deputy Homeland Security Advisor and Administrator for the Hawaii Office of Homeland Security. In regards to what we're going to discuss today of the three branches of our office, we are responsible for the planning and operations related to cybersecurity for the state of Hawaii, critical infrastructure protection, and importantly, the collaboration and coordination between both our public and our private entities, both in critical infrastructure and throughout the state enterprise. We also, underneath our division, have the Hawaii State Fusion Center, which is the nexus between information and intelligence sharing and analysis, which is a key ingredient and part of what we're going to discuss today as well. Thank you.
Aloha, everybody. Josh Rockhill, go by Rocky, proud commander of 688 Cyberspace Wing. I just want to point out that the Air Force was put in the middle of this table. I'm not sure why that is, but I'll take it. Thank you so much. No, thanks, Ron. $20 coming to you. Hey, listen, we got a few thousand airmen in the 688. Their job is primarily DOTIN operations. That's really changed over the years, right? So now we're talking about CSSP operations too. And as we think about sort of the protraction of what may have to happen for what General Smith described, to do everything up to potentially get into a conflict scenario, that CSSP force is prominent and powerful, and it has to be good. So we spend a lot of time thinking about that around the globe. For the Air Force's apportionment of the DOTIN, something we're really passionate about, but also happy to talk about broader mission assurance. To assure things, you have to provide them, so the DOTIN has to work, the AFIN has to work, the lightning bolts have to work, and you have to defend them. And I just spoke to that a little bit, so happy to take questions on those things or anything else you got. Thanks for letting us be here.
All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. Are y'all fired up? I'm glad to hear that. I'm fired up as well. I'm Captain Kenny Smith. I am the Deputy MOC Director for Fleet Cyber Command. I am here representing the Commander for Fleet Cyber, Vice Admiral Craig Clapperton. First of all, hey, Ron, I'd like to thank you and the team as well as the J6 for having me a part of this panel here today. As Fleet Cyber, we are the service component for U.S. Cyber Command in support of U.S. Indo-PACOM as well as SOUTCOM. Our job here is to support, just like my counterpart here said today, is to support everything that the J6 brought up, to include when we talk about network support. And that's our job here as the MOC. And I'll get more into the MOC as we start getting into the questions, but feel free to ask me questions in regards to what a MOC is and how we fight in the Navy as a part of this partnership that you see that is up here today for this very important event. Thank you.
All right, last but not least, hopefully, Colonel Chris Stoddard. So I'm the commander of the Army's Cyber Protection Brigade for Army's Cyber, so under Lieutenant General Maria Barrett. So put that in context. So in my brigade, I have all of the Army's cyber protection teams. So essentially 22 cyber protection teams. Half of them are apportioned to the Joint Force to conduct DCO operations for the Joint Force, and half are apportioned to the Army to conduct DCO operations on Army networks. So here to answer any questions. Very much appreciate we put the Air Force in the middle because they're the smartest and they're going to get all the tough questions. But Ron, really appreciate the invite on behalf of Lieutenant General Barrett. Appreciate being here.
All right. Thank you, panelists. Yeah, so as you can see, we have a really good spectrum of expertise from the operational down to the tactical level. So part of the purpose of this is certainly to share how current and emerging cyberspace operations initiatives aligns with U.S. Indo-PACOM. And in a lot of ways, I think what we've previously known as things that happened on in the background, we can all attest to, and hopefully this will come through, how they're becoming part of the forefront, how they're becoming the forefront of operations and the activities that we're all kind of pursuing at a local, federal, and even Department of Defense level. Our desired end state is unity of effort for deliberate cyberspace operations in the Indo-Pacific Theater. As I look out of the audience, we have a great mix of military, industry, and even foreign allies and partners. So I'd like to kind of focus the first question in that vein. What role do these partners play, whether it's interagency, industry, or foreign partners and allies, in our evolving definition of integrated operations, especially as it pertains to cyberspace operations?
All right, Ron, I'll take that question. So in the realm of cyber warfare, partners are really the keystone to our integrated operations. They create a digital fortress that is stronger than the sum of its parts. And as we say at CISA, cybersecurity is a team sport, and I think we've heard that from other panelists and keynotes. And everyone has an important role in that team. So that team should include a mix of agencies, federal agencies, bringing in their diverse governmental expertise and industry partners contributing their state-of-the-art technology and the real-time threat intelligence, right? So in this space, collaboration really is integral into being able to protect and defend the nation. This partnership ecosystem isn't just a strategic advantage, it's a necessity in a battlefield that knows no borders. And this collaboration was actually highlighted in the incident that happened with SolarWinds back in 2020, if anybody still remembers that. A private cybersecurity firm first detected the breach and notified our government partners. CISA, my agency, then coordinated a whole-of-government response to this incident. A unified cyber coordination group was created, and this group consisted of CISA and other federal partners, as well as industry partners who collaborated to mitigate the risks of this incident. This incident underscores the necessity of a collaborative approach to cyber warfare, and where the expertise and resources of our diverse partners converge to defend the nation, right? And so we have more of a proactive stance rather than a reactive one.
Yeah, so what I would add to that comment also is about continuity in planning. When we look at that collaboration between federal, Department of Defense, and state and county partners, what's really important is what's left of incident. And when we're in blue sky and we're planning for a cyber incident response, when we're talking about that holistic or whole of government approach to responding to whatever those threats are and what those incidents may be, and how quickly and how time is of the essence, what is just as important is that we develop those plans and we have those in place for when those elements within our federal spectrum move on. So when we have transitions, so that we don't create gaps, we don't create voids in our capabilities based on transitions of personnel. So really, when it comes to the state perspective, is that in our responsibilities and working on a continuously years-long effort with our networks within our own state executive branch and those within the private sector, it's important that we have something in place that allows us to continue those relationships when our federal counterparts move on, or PCS.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, and thanks a lot for that. One thing that I want to add, if you listen to what they just said, the most important thing that they had talked about as they discussed is what we in the military always say, we call about COMREL. This is a great opportunity to bring up the fact that everything they discuss, it is about command relationship. It's about understanding where you sit at in the fight. So if you look at what Jillian brought up, she talked about the incident that happened in the coordination and the collaboration. All that is about understanding where you sit at in the fight. You're either going to be support team or you're going to be the supported. And that sometimes kind of get confused when you have a lot of partnership, engagements, other services, because we're all unique in our own way and we all know what we are special in and what we know. However, in order for us to work together, we have to understand that relationship. And the key is understanding where you at, because it will change. It is not always the same place. You will go from supported and then back to support team. You just have to understand that piece. Thanks, Ron.
Rocky?
All right, I had to pause for a second because those answers are great, but Jen, they were great. But Jen said SolarWinds, and I had a moment of PTSD here. I might have blacked out, but I think I got just the gist of it all. That was a tough time, but not because CISA wasn't terrific. They were. Maybe another thought too on this is PACE plans, right? So. I think maybe one of the great things we have, I've grown up in the institution of the arms, is that our enlisted force, especially in Westphalian society, is maybe the secret weapon that we have. And the answer doesn't connect other for this reason. They spend a lot of time getting ready and doing things that potential adversaries and the like may not be as good at. We raise them to do that. They crush it. Honestly, I think one of the best bargains in the Air Force and every military service is an E9, a chief in the Air Force, how much we pay them versus how much we should. They're amazing. Connect that to our industry partners, for example. There is a lot of PACE capacity, all caps, PACE, in our industry partners. Cloud service providers out the wazoo. If you go visit them, I won't name them because if I name them, somebody's going to yell at me from across the room there and say you didn't name mine. But they have tremendous capacity, and maybe what we need to start doing in our O plans and our sort of Annex Ks and the like in the back, military parlance, is think about the capacity they have and how we tap into that. Technology has allowed us to do that, right? Off-prem computing, on-prem computing, cloud computing, multi-segmented routing, black core, yada, yada, yada. There's a lot of industry capacity there to help us, and I think it's a force enabler, much as if our enlisted forces, from day-to-day military operations, we should leverage more.
And I agree with the entire team here. When you think through the role of partnerships in cyberspace operations, I think the team hit on it with the interagency role, everything from intelligence to drive cyberspace operations, whether that's defensive cyberspace operations or offensive cyberspace operations, to industry, which truly gives us the cutting edge technology that we have and the expertise. But then when we think about the third piece of partnerships, when we talk about our foreign partnerships and we look at the Indo-Pacom Theater, when you think about it, a large-scale conflict here, it involves a lot of foreign partners. And we were just having a discussion before this panel with our Japanese counterpart from a defensive cyberspace operations standpoint. And I think it's key for us collectively as a DoD to understand how our partners do, in my case, defensive cyberspace operations. Because when you think about the collective networks, it's not just the AFCENT, it's going to be some sort of mission partner environment network. The network's going to be interconnected, and we're going to have to defend that network. So it's critically important that we understand how our partners look at defending a network, how we defend a network, and how we collectively exercise that to make sure we can defend the collective network, not just, in my case, the Army's network. Extremely important to me, it's my job. But I think about, when you talk about roles of partnerships, weaving in our foreign partners to get after that operational picture.
Yeah. Thank you, panel members. I mean, I think in a lot of ways what I heard there are things that I see every day. I mean, really, partnerships become the cornerstone of an effective cyberspace campaign. I think I heard in a lot of ways, not only is it about mitigating and shoring up vulnerabilities, but in doing so, you're actually building force multipliers. So it's not just an enablement perspective. Having healthy partnerships across the interagency, the joint force, and then even foreign partners, I mean, absolutely becomes force multipliers. And in that, that really achieves Admiral Paparo's vision of integrated warfighting, where not only are you presenting a deterrence through those partnerships, but probably even just as important, you're developing absolute advantage. Absolute advantage in the integration and being able to maneuver together and being able to share intelligence, threat information at the speed of the threat. Because, to be honest, we're not exactly sure, how or where we're going to get hit. We know we're going to get hit, and so it's incumbent upon us to kind of build the systems and processes in now to allow us to respond and become resilient. So with that, I'd like to shift to the second question. And so what does cyber integration look like today? I think that's a pretty lofty term. Everyone, understands like integration is integration, right? Is it coordinated? Is it synchronized? Is it something else? And so I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, and if that's even sufficient. And as you take a moment to respond, where do you think the biggest gains are for us in the near future?
All right, I'll take that again.
Thanks, Jen.
So ideal cyber integration today functions like a youth sports team. I say youth because I don't know if you've seen kids play like under 8. They're not all well coordinated, right? Like some teams may be a lot better than other teams, and some are like, my daughter plays soccer, so I see this all the time where they have one kid who just takes the ball and doesn't pass to their team players. So that's kind of how it is right now. It's somewhat coordinated and also complementary, but we talked about the different agencies here, and I think that each agency needs to cooperate and coordinate like a winning sports team, right? We cannot win the game by ourselves. We need to we need to work together in order for us to succeed. And if we have a whole of nation trying to attack us, we should have a whole of nation to defend us from that threat vector. However, sometimes, and you mentioned this earlier, Kenny, sometimes in our effort to do the right thing, we don't communicate properly with each other, we may step on each other, we may duplicate our efforts, and we certainly need to improve on that. So that I think that's where we need to improve upon in the future, right? And also, if we work cohesively as a team, utilizing industry partners to provide us some of that threat intelligence and some of that cutting edge technology, we can move towards being able to predict these threats and be proactive rather than just being reactive in some of these threats that we see.
No, I'll go ahead and add to that. So one of the comments that General Smith mentioned was about the alignment, and I really can't stress how important that is. And when we talk about how do we approach that integration, what it looks like now, I would agree that we are discussing it. When we talk about the buzz term of Homeland Defense planning, what does that look like when we go from that pathway of Homeland Security to Homeland Defense? And really, what are the authorities in that? What are the roles and responsibilities based on whether you're a Title 10 force or you're a Title 32 guardsman, or if you're a state authority, right? All of that, and then going back to Colonel Stouter's point about exercising, I think is the key element of what the future looks like. When we talk about these plans, it needs to be that we integrate state, local, and county authorities and our federal counterparts into these exercises that incorporate cyber scenarios, so that in those measles, they include those injects of how the state authorities are going to work with and how our Title 10 counterparts are going to either go hands on keyboard or otherwise sit next to or support, or vice versa when we look at a disparate environment, right? So what does that look like when the state is supporting the Department of Defense? And I think that's something where we have to explore moving into the future.
All right, I'm going to jump in, Frank, outstanding. And you used one of the key words, you said exercise. I would like to say, I'm going to be honest with you. If you look across the table here, and I ask you to look out there, and I ask you to look out to the audience out there that you see, I would like to believe we are already doing the integration. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Are we where we need to be? Absolutely not. But the fact that we're sitting here talking about this, it shows how important it is, and it does show that we are integrated. And just like Frank brought up, exercises is how we are going to get better at it. And we need to get better at it as a partnership. We need to get better at the communication piece. We need to get better at understanding what it is our role is in this as we defend our nation.
Hey, Chris, can I jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
We just established an order. Jen's going to do all the smart stuff, and we're just all going to fall behind. And Frank's going to clean it up, and Kenny's going to amp us up. Maybe two other perspectives as well, because that was all well spoken. On the OCO side, and this forum may not be as familiar to many here, but some perhaps we can't get there because of classifications. But I think on the OCO side, we've actually come a really long ways. I'm an optimist. I recall where it was 10, 15 years ago, and it's really come a long ways. But there's a challenge we have, again, for another forum to discuss, is when you do scaled operations at speed against a peer in a theater that has so many international partners, interagency partners, commercial partners, I don't know that we're prepared for that, because we really keep our hands tightly wound around the wheel when we execute OCO. So we have a great flow to deconflict, we have a great flow to communicate, we have a great flow to decide how to integrate, but we need a lot of time to do that, and I think that's going to be a challenge for us in a scaled operation come theater, and we need to exercise that. So that's point one. Point two is restoration operations, so CSSP passion, right? You have to be able to restore things. Yes, you have to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. That recover piece is hard. For people who have been through many things, many operations, you know that, because you have all these partnerships. So how do you recover? You've had a kinetic strike, maybe potentially in a conflict. You actually had a kinetic strike, you lost a CSB. Maybe you had a non-kinetic strike where you lost a degree of battle management activity. How do you recover from that once you've done the analytical work to know that you've got your defenses up as high as risk reasonable? Risk reasonable being, I may not need them all up because I'm fighting, and I'm gonna allow some hits. How do I recover? Well, I'm probably going to have to call a local telco. I'm going to have to call the power co. I'm going to have to, all those things. And we need to exercise those things, not just in tabletop, but in real time. Those are two places I'd focus.
Yeah, so now I'm always the last guy. So I completely agree. When you talk about integration, and there's many different ways that you can look at the word integration. I think you asked whether it should be coordinated or synchronized. So I'll give an operational answer and really a DoD mindset. I think culturally, it's easier, just like Rocky said, when you think about offensive cyberspace operations, to think about those in terms of a maneuver element. So I will tell you my thought on cyberspace operations are, it's a maneuver element in a domain of warfare. So it's almost like asking, well, should you coordinate or synchronize land warfare into a, so the answer is yes. And it's really easy from an offensive cyberspace operation to see that picture and understand that. But I'd offer from a defensive position, it's the same. It's a maneuver element in a domain of warfare. The terrain may be different. The outcome's the same, to impose cost on an adversary. But that's how I would look at integrating or synchronizing. I would look at it no differently, whether you have a DCO element or OCO element or even a CSSP element. I firmly believe that's all cost imposition. The adversary wants to take away our ability to C2, to do things, to protect our own forces. And we want to proactively, just like we talked about, make sure they don't do that. So if you think about it from a culture standpoint as it's maneuver, it's pure maneuver in a domain of warfare, I think the coordination and synchronization tends to be a little simpler when you think about that. Now, when you add an interagency and other authorities, much more challenging. But from a DoD perspective, I think sometimes we think cyber is really, really special, and we try to answer it in a very complex way. But when you think about it, it's simply maneuver to impose cost, whether you're defending a network proactively or you're potentially attacking a network or doing some sort of offensive cyberspace operation. So I'd offer that.
Yeah, those are great perspectives, and what I really like is that you didn't fall into the trap of it's either or, it's both and it depends on the scenario and the situation. I mean, much like we do defense in depth and layer different things based on the point of need or the use case, we do the same thing in cyberspace. We understand who has the right authorities, who has the right capabilities, and then we kind of layer them in a way that fits, the situation. I think we're just finding that there are a lot of situations where, we have skin in the game and we have something to offer collectively. And if you were to ask me, and I'll ask myself, right? I think
Ron,
for me,
what would you say?
The biggest potential lies in kind of what we're doing here. We have so many critical dependencies, and with the way that information and operational technologies just continue to, proliferate and converge. That's where we're going to gain competitive advantage. The more that we know that, and we can rely on each other to kind of understand, who's got the ball right now. To go back to a little bit of the Little League sports analogy, and then be able to depend on them and build them into the game. So build the playbook based on that, and that's exactly what we're doing. So I feel good about that. So we've been kind of scratching around the fringes of limitations, right? And more about where's application appropriate. But let's get real a little bit and talk about those limitations. I just referenced sort of the expanding nature of information and operational technology. We're not going back. We're not putting that back in the box. Digital systems and network connectivity will always underpin everything that we do when it comes to the core warfighting principles and capabilities. So when you look at that, or when you think about that, it seems to almost counterbalance the promise of what cyber can offer to transform warfighting. So what does a realistic view to you look like of its integration into joint warfighting, and in terms of developing absolute advantage that I talked about earlier, or as a deterrent? So this is probably a little bit more. So Jen, I think I'm letting you off the hook and throwing this one initially at our military brothers. So over to them.
I think we should let Chris go first.
Sure. I wasn't expecting that. So I did read. I did read a little bit into the notes of the question, and there was a, Ron said, hey, think about the vast terrain to defend. Is that a limitation? So that was kind of a context question. The answer is absolutely yes. So I'll talk from an Army perspective. So I think the Army's network is potentially the second largest network on the planet when you collectively put it all together. Over 1 million endpoints and a global network. So when you think about how would you defend that network? And you look to the only Army Cyber Protection Brigade and said, hey, you have CPTs, can you do that? The answer is absolutely not. So yesterday, the G6 of the Army was up here talking about a little bit about the network. So when you think about limitations of defending such a large network, I think it's multifaceted like you talked about, Ron. It's defense in depth. So the G6 of the Army talks a lot about network convergence. So what we're doing in the Army network convergence and going to zero trust. So this idea of one collective network under zero trust, continually monitored, that's step one in this layered defense. And then there's other elements like Rocky talked about. He's equivalent to the Army's network, NetCom. They have the stand-on-the-wall defense through their global cyber centers and their regional cyber centers that are designed to day-to-day defend the network. So you have a network that's converged, you have a network that's under zero trust principles, and then you have local defenders globally that are designed to defend. And then you layer in maybe the cyber protection teams that, in my view, are aligned to hunt nation-state adversaries. Yes, I care about patching and CVEs and things like that. However, I'm designed to hunt exquisite adversaries, and that's what cyber protection teams from the Army's perspective. So when you look at that, it has to be layered because there's a limitation in the sheer volume of networks. And as every Army unit today and every day stand up new creative ways to talk, so we can talk collectively to our inner service, we create a larger network. So that's a limitation, but I think it ties into this idea that it has to be layered. You can't look to the network defenders, whether it's the NetCom or the cyber protection teams, to be your defense. It has to be layered from the top all the way down.
Okay, I'll jump in there. Outstanding, real quick there. Chris, outstanding. One of the things that when you talk about limitations, as we think about this, let's be real. Resources is one, but I'm gonna be honest with you, guess what? I'm gonna stay away from that, right? Because we can talk a long time about the resources necessary to be, for this. What I'm gonna anchor on is, and you heard me mention it before, is simply understanding. Understanding the importance of your network and what is the importance of the network and how to protect your network. That's where we talk about that limitation to get everybody to understand. So let's just take, for instance, Doden. When they would do their inspections on networks, their mindset was it's a compliance thing. So when they roll into a command, they would say, are you compliant with this? Are you compliant with that? Well, Doden had to change that mindset. And it's about operational readiness and mission assurance. Without operational readiness or mission assurance, the job can't get done. So you change the mindset. So when you're going in and you're doing an inspection, if the mindset is you're not ready for operations, the mission can't be completed, then you think that way. If you think about compliance, all you say is, all right, I got this patch in, I've done this, I've done that, and I'm good to go. However, if you go, oh, hold up, we can't do our mission, that's a problem. We're not operationally ready. Well, that's the whole purpose, right? That's the purpose of everybody that wears the uniform, all the civilians, and all the contractors that we work with. That's the purpose of everybody you see out there that wants to show us something. That is the key. It's the mindset. And it's a limitation because of the understanding. And so I ask everybody that are here, make sure that you understand that that's what the limitation is. So as you discuss network security and cybersecurity, you discuss it in a way where it's important. Think of yourself as an individual. In order for you to operate, let's think about your own account, correct? Cybersecurity, if you don't have a VPN or something loaded on your phone, you go in there, you get in your account, your money's gone. Can you operate without your money in your account? Can you operate? Don't think it as compliance. Well, the bank said I have to download this program for my stuff to work. No, think about it as if I don't do this, I can't operate because rent won't get paid. So that's where I'm referring to when I say the limitations. I'll let somebody else deal with the resources.
Yeah, I'm not touching resources right now, but we need more. But you know, the country's got a lot of things to pay for, and so do our partners. I've also decided that I'm not going to let Chris answer first anymore either, because between he and Jen, there's nothing left. They're so good at what they do, and Kenny just got me hyped up. I'm ready to run through a wall. That's what Frank and I were talking about. So, hey, a couple other perspectives, right? Just to fill in maybe a couple cracks, is that I think when we talk about limitations, I'm a realist, but I'm an optimist, right? And that is, we've come a long ways. Give Cyber Command some credit. I'm going to speak militarily. Give Cyber Command some credit. Just elevated a handful of years ago. DODIN, remember the days of like before JFHQ DODIN, right? What it was back then. It's different now. You know, GNO and all the things. We've really come a long ways. We've got a good sequence, but maybe some gaps. All the C's. FMAC, MRTC, KTC. We're all terrible at it. Congress lets us know that. They put some laws out to say hurry up, and then we don't get there yet. We've got to fix that. I think industry partners can help with that. I think we've made that too hard. I think we've also started to look at the wrong thing. We've taken it from an engineering perspective and not from what Kenny's talking about, which is like a mission flow perspective. Let's get to that KTC real quick, and then do terrain awareness on that KTC. If you do that, then you can decide to, I think to Chris's point, how you layer what I would say your assurance, which is, again, in my view, is equal parts providing and defending. I believe those are some gaps that we can probably get after. My sense is we will then later connect that to interagency partners, whether that be what Frank's doing or what Jen's doing, et cetera, because I need to know where some of their limitations are in the DIB. So I need my partners to kind of open up beyond their RMF checklists and let me, hey, you know what, I have 2 data centers, but one's only got 1 line of power, et cetera, so I understand where the risks might be. Those might be some of the things we can build upon, but first we got to know thyself.
Excellent. No, thank you for those answers. I mean, in a lot of ways, it resonates with sort of the theme of what we've been talking about. I think with the advent of cyberspace operations really emerging, you know, it's an opportunity, right? And not so many limitations, but rather opportunities to think and act differently in a lot of the ways. You know, new approaches to go from indicators of compromise to patterns of behavior. New opportunities to implement censoring, monitoring, and analysis using artificial intelligence and machine learning, new opportunities to integrate between local defenders, cyber protection teams, you know, and then on the whole partnership theme, you know, what we do there. So I think on the offensive side, I would also offer that, you know, oftentimes we look at access as a precious resource. You know, I think with the expanding attack surface, I think we ought to really think about and integrate it as a renewable, near infinite resource in some ways. So just in the same way that we look at, wow, we got to defend all this, well, that allows us to pose that many dilemmas for anyone that we're planning against in the future. So kind of with that, you know, we think of cyberspace operations, as at least when we're talking about the joint force, the traditional approach is to integrate cyber in a supporting fashion, right, with the physical conventional operation activity. Say the movement and maneuver of this aircraft carrier of this tank brigade or this bomber task force. How do we have cyber support that? And I think that's all well and good, and we're getting there. We're growing. We're continuing to do that. But how much should we be thinking about the reverse of that, integrating some of those conventional operations to support cyber operations, and what might that look like? I mean, this is pretty much an abstract, far future, but you know, perhaps the more we can start to address that today, I think the better off we'll be in kind of acknowledging sort of that, you know, it's the right tool at the right time on the right scenario. So, please, Chris.
So I wouldn't offer it as a complete abstract. So I agree with you, and I agree with what Rocky said. You know, from a cyber perspective, we've come a long way conducting cyberspace operations. But I will say, in a small vignette, you know, roughly 10 years ago, if you remember, you know, the ISIS challenge and what was going on in Syria and Iraq from an ISIS perspective. And Cybercom was involved in that. Cybercom was involved with a lot of that, But I'll offer, and there's a bunch of open source things out there. I think there's a Darknet Diaries about Glowing Symphony. You can read all about it, and you can hear a guy named Neil Ferrano kind of walk you through that operation. So, but I'll put in context, Neil worked for me for that operation. I'll put some things in context to illustrate this inverse approach. So that was synchronized and coordinated cyberspace effects with kinetic effects. CENTCOM was driving kinetic effects against ISIS media, and cyber was weaved in. But there was a portion of that operation that it was a pure cyber target. There was an online radio broadcast that was, broadcasting propaganda, and it was hosting a bunch of, let's be honest, like beheading videos, very egregious videos. And it was a cyber problem. And from a cyber perspective, we said, hey, cyber-wise, we would like that not to exist. And CENTCOM got on board and said, you know what? We can have some kinetic effects against some of the hard infrastructure, cell towers, potential leaders. And we can coordinate some kinetic operations in support of your cyber operation to remove ISIS media. So yes, 10 plus years ago, much smaller, much more, not as challenging as when you look at Indo-PACOM and look at this threat and look at large-scale combat operations. But from a vignette standpoint, I think the thought process of having a cyber target and then synchronizing kinetic effects to support that, it exists. So I hope that gives a little bit of insight into what you were talking about. Much more challenging large-scale combat operation. That's why I'm going to pass it to all the smart people to get their thoughts on that.
What are you talking about, Chris? That was outstanding. Appreciate it. Now you put me in the spot. Now I have to come back from that. All right, so I'm just going to ad-lib on what Chris already put out. I need you to look at it this way. See the fingers? Right here. See the fingers right here? Look at the two front. This is what I want you to see. I can just do this all day long. But when I do this, I interlocked. Where am I going? So when we talk about conventional and we talk about cyber, no, it's this, right? Each is all their own domains, but one cannot operate without the other. And so think of it as this. We can't go nowhere. It's tight. We have to operate in order to punch. We can do this all day. All I'm doing is poke somebody in the eye. But this right here, mighty punch. So I need you to think about that when we talk about that whole piece, and Jim brought up earlier, being proactive. So we have to be proactive. We have to look at it as it is already a part of it. But here's the thing. Again, it's getting out of our own lane and thinking about how it is together. Give you an example. When I was in a meeting not too long ago, and they were looking at the budget, and they had infrastructure here, and then they had cybersecurity over here, and then they had information operations over here, but the numbers for those were real low, but infrastructure was way high. And I had to think about how was I going to approach that, because I'm like, well, hold up, wait a minute. You're talking fleet cyber here. That doesn't look right. And I had to debate on, do I bring up the fact that when you think of cybersecurity, it is a part of the infrastructure you're going to build, or do I not say anything so that they don't at least forget about it? And so when I brought it up, I said, hey, I noticed you have it there. I'm just curious. And she talked about, well, when we built this big old bridge, and they talk about building a bridge, all that's included in that. Well, that's great, because you're thinking about just that particular bridge and how it's going to operate and connect. But how does it connect elsewhere? How is it connected somewhere else? And so to think of cybersecurity in a sense where it's separate, it really is not. It is a part of it. And that's got to be, again, I talked about that before, that mindset. And we have to think beyond our own understanding. And that's where we lock ourselves in. We have to get out of that. And you see the table up here. It is everybody's different. Everybody has a different job. But if I look over here to my left and look to my right, I can't do my job without them. Nothing can happen without them. Because you think about it, maritime, I'll just be sitting out there all day long in the middle of the ocean. We can't get the job done that way. Connectiveness.
I just want to add quickly, first of all, Kenny, I'm just going to call you every day, and you're going to wake me up in the morning. I'm going to run through some walls, man. Pumped up. No, I dig it. Hey, two perspectives, maybe, again, just a different angle slightly, because they've spoke so well to all of it. In the Air Force, so Air Force analogy, we rely a lot on something called weapons officers, and to us, they are trained in the arts, right? They're the person in the vault. The vault is where the highest classification is. It's where the capabilities are most discussed. They understand tactics and techniques and procedures to get after certain outcomes. In air power, that's got a long lineage of success. We're just figuring that out, I think, in the cyber domain. What does that mean? Well, I need to let those airmen who become weapons officers in the cyber domain, this is in the Air Force example, but please apply it. I need to let them become the colonels and the general officers that are running the planning elements for theater campaigns, and they'll bring some of that perspective with them, and they'll say, hey, this is how I can connect it too, because I've been at Red Flag where those international coalition exercises are going on, and I think I can deliver some effects. Right now, it's inverted still. We're at a point of an axis where I think it's intersecting, but because of time, that's going to come. The second part that I often think about, and I think Kenny was speaking to it a little bit, is how do you kind of get up every day and go, how can I solve this problem differently? And frankly, one of the things I'm going to do after I leave this session is I will talk to the individuals to my right, but I will talk probably even more to the individuals to my left, because I would have loved to have had Frank's mind and Jen's mind when I'm doing OCO planning, because they have perspectives on what some of the vulnerabilities and the opportunities are that I may not be thinking, and delivery methods and things that I may not be thinking about, because I view it from sort of a linear military operation perspective and not from the whole, and that's different. Think about partnerships with the labs. How do I deconstruct SCADA systems where I don't necessarily have the depth organically and understand what I can do with that, and then I can do the Missouri show me state thing a little bit. If I do X, I will achieve Y to outcome Z, and I believe we've got to kind of calibrate ourselves with that expertise a little better.
From a civil authorities perspective, as it relates to what we're talking about, the one thing, especially here in Hawaii, is our understanding of DCI, and if there's any part of this that we do to support mission assurance, it would be understanding our role in being able to have that protection and have that connectivity to what DCI is here and what our roles are in ensuring its capability and its continuity so that the mission can be completed from your perspectives, right?
Yeah, and just I completely agree with you, Kenny. Cyber needs to be elevated as an equal partner in the battle space, right? They can no longer be just the supporting role. Cyber can't be just another tool in your toolbox. It needs to be part of the fight, right? So, yeah, especially with physical and physical and digital now being linked that way, we really need to think about how we can improve upon that partnership and how we can integrate both cyber and physical in the battle space.
Yeah, excellent thoughts on the topic. I think in a lot of ways, at the end of the day, regardless of what sort of background you have, at least for the military, and I'm sure there's a parallel in the civilian sector, is that you want to affect outcomes. Whoever's that decision maker, whether it's a ground force commander, a ship CO, or a local administrator, the ability for cyberspace and its effect on operations is well known, and I think it's well accepted. The hard part or the opportunity is because it's a lot more unseen. It's a little bit more technical than most things, like something flying in the air or floating on the ocean. It requires sort of folks that really truly understand it at that keyboard level, and then to be able to think about it in terms of what decisions, what outcomes can I help inform and affect, whether it's at a local level or all the way up to the combatant commander level. So I think this has been an excellent conversation. I mean, I think at this point I'd like to open it up to anybody that submitted questions on the portal or maybe even has a question in the audience to step up to the mic. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. I think we have someone in the back that's helping to.
We've gotten a few through the email. First one, can you describe what would be the biggest gap in your J6 DCO that your command lacks today, and advise how industry could bring these capabilities to you?
I'll pitch first. A whole lot of things. But the first thing that comes to mind, and we spoke to a little bit, I don't mean to be repetitive, is terrain awareness. It's the proliferation of devices and the way that we go about identifying that terrain. And when I mean by terrain awareness is I got to understand information flows. Again, I'm talking about the stack Cs of FMAC, MRTC, and KTC. I need to get to KTC and understand the information flows. And then I can help prioritize and work back, as I think Chris said earlier, kind of the layers of defense and layers of assurance. I don't think I've seen a good industry solution to that, and it tends to at some point become still a lot more manual than it needs to be. Now, don't give me something that's a bot that's going to crawl my network. It's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for things that can help me kind of map processes quickly and scale it and figure out where the key nodes are and where those packets are going that are most important, because I can't defend everything. And in a big fight, I'm going to lose a lot of things. And I got to be okay with, in the Air Force, we talk a lot about R squared. I'm just going to pull boards off and put boards in and keep moving. You know, it's just what it is. I don't have time in a big fight, so I need help with that. Over.
So I won't offer a perspective from the Indo-Pacific J6. However, when you talk about DCO and one of the gaps that industry can absolutely help, and it's the problem of big data. So to effectively find exquisite, to effectively find the type of adversary we're looking for in this theater, you need access to data, and then you need to really perfect the idea of artificial intelligence and machine learning to dig into that data. So problem one is, how do you collect all the data? So when you think about, I talked about the Army's network, but you're talking about the joint network. How do you collect all that data? Where do you store it? And then more importantly, how do you look through that data? From a DCO perspective, how do you look through to find the thing that you're looking for to prevent that thing from turning off your comms at the place you don't need it turned off? I think a data problem is out there, and I know there's many people working towards that, but that would be my take from an industry perspective is a big data problem.
Yeah, fortunately, Kenny, do you want to go ahead?
Sure, I'll jump in just briefly. First of all, Josh and Chris, you guys laid it out tight, so really appreciate that. You set everything up. Here's the thing that I tell people that I work with, and people know me very well. Industry, you're very smart. You're doing what you're doing for a reason. Here's where I come in, because when Chris brought up, he specifically talked about AI and machine learning. Here's the thing that I tell people all the time. Break it down to me Barney style. Okay, I tell people, everybody comes at me, when they come at me this way, they've already lost me. Way over here, I say break it down to me Barney style. And they got to come down to my level, and so that I can understand it. So if I can sit and turn and explain to Josh here what you just told me, that means I got it. So industry, if you're gonna say, hey, I got this great tool, and this IA tool, this machine learning tool that's gonna support your DCO gap, you don't break it down to me Barney style, you already lost me. You got to come down to where we can understand exactly how you're going to help us map exactly what Josh just talked about. How do we map that terrain? But you got to make sure I understand it. And I got to be able to turn around and see anybody sitting in this audience, I can sit up here and look smart like these gentlemen and explain it to y'all, and y'all will get it. That's what we're looking for from the industry out there. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, so coincidentally, maybe fortunately, General Smith and I were just talking about this a little bit earlier today. And there are definitely some key areas where industry could help us. We've been talking a lot about partnerships and interoperability, and I think in that vein, what we're missing are affordable cyber ranges. Where are these opportunities where we can create and do not just a tabletop exercise, but do an actual integrated exercise with the National Guard, with CISA, with foreign partners, and kind of walk through, movement and maneuver, on net. I think that's one opportunity. I think another one are solutions to continue the conversation of cybersecurity at pace and at cost and scale. Already between USINDOPACOM and US Cybercom, we've been developing a continuum of engagement with our key allies and partners to get in there, help them out, try to understand the networks and the cybersecurity environment that they're dealing with, to follow up with them and see, hey, how can we help with our expertise to help harden and strengthen those systems? But I think that's not necessarily sufficient or complete. At the end of the day, we're going to need those countries are going to have to find it within their own resources and budgets to continue on that story. And so I think there's definitely an opportunity for industry being at the forefront of what the vulnerabilities and the solutions are to be able to provide that. And then kind of in the same vein, the critical infrastructure and key resources support. Operational technology is one of those things that are really starting to be illuminated for us. And sometimes these systems are in varying degrees of posture and update. And so, oftentimes it comes down to bottom line as to whether or not, some of these corporations and providing these key services to the Department of Defense and local populations can really invest in it. And so, that's where industry, especially here, has done a great job of, providing higher quality services for lower and lower costs as time goes on. So how do we get to them? Because it's not going to be a cyber protection team. It's not going to be CISA all the time, or FBI or the Interagency. We got to make sure that that type of service and support and that monitoring is accessible and affordable too. So I think those are sort of some of the key things that we're talking about.
I think we have time for two more. First of those, Colonel Rockhill, you mentioned how our chiefs and our enlisted force are helping us advance cyber operations across the DoDN. How do you see Air Force warrant officers integrating into the future of cyberspace operations?
We're doing warrant officers? Thank you. Thanks for going for that. Hey, I love that question. It's been a long discussion. So really, in a few areas, in the interest of time, I'll go a little faster, but I'm happy to take follow-ups. On the OCO side, I think it will look very similar to what we've seen from the Army in particular. And CMTs and CSTs, the integration that they take there. And I think that's good. I think in the DCO space, CPTs, somewhat similar. We'll do it slightly differently because we rely on our senior insurer. Everybody does, that's not my point, but we've relied on them in those technical spaces, especially just pre-senior insurer, the tech sergeant rank, the master sergeant rank, E6, E7. We've got to figure that out, and I think that's going to be a discovery learning period for us for a few years, maybe several years. We don't have a lot of time, shot clock's running. So we're going to figure that out. And I think on the DoDN side is where it becomes the most unique for us. We really pushed in to get what ended up being probably a couple dozen or more inside of our command structure alone, which is a bit like NetCom. We kind of run the tier 3, like I said, for the Air Force Information Network, and we CSSP it. And we're going to put at least a couple in every one of the squadrons inside of my wing. I'm humbled to leave. And you'll find them in the operational space, absolutely, and you'll find them in the tactics and training shops. Being those folks who kind of set the standard and the conditions long term, it's vital because honestly, we have so much turnover. And I'm asking 19-year-olds to do things that maybe on the outside 29, 39, and 49-year-olds do with a lot of degrees. And it's hard to keep them once they learn it for cause. And I'd love to have a warrant there to help sort of bridge that gap. And the other thing, that's the terrain of complexity. Not taking anything away from the OCO and DCO force, it's hard. But when you're on that terrain every day, man, there's a lot of bits and bytes moving, and you got to figure that out. And I think warrant officers would be extremely important to that. But one thing I'd give a caution, and I'll wrap. It's going to probably kind of go, if anybody can see, it's going to kind of go like this for a while. We're going to assume they're going to do this. We're going to reset at some point, they're going to do this, and we'll land in the middle after a few years, of what that looks like, because we have a little cultural change. I mean, y'all, I don't even know what I do with a warrant officer in the Air Force right now. What do I call him, Mr., Mrs.? I don't know. I'm literally going to go through training soon to learn what I do, right? And I think that's fascinating to us. So we'll have a little bit of growth opportunity, but I look forward to relying on them technically and operationally.
One more?
What are the plans to develop and maintain the cyber skills necessary across the cyber workforce?
I can talk to this, but I don't want to bogart the mic, so I'm going to not.
I can take a stab at it. So through the state Homeland, through the state local cybersecurity grant program through the Department of Homeland Security, we have as one of our goals to develop programs and to use those funds to put towards workforce development, and that's in partnership with our educational partners, our higher educational partners, through other non-governmental entities like Cyber Hawaii and others, to identify and then to grow and hopefully hold on to and retain those that are interested in and want to work towards, whether it's roles in government and or the military, but specifically for us, selfishly, is to stay here in Hawaii in those roles. So that's one aspect of what we're doing here in the state of Hawaii.
I may add, so CISA has been working with all of the states and territories. As you mentioned, Frank, the state and local cybersecurity grant program that's under DHS is actually managed through CISA. And one of the requirements from that grant is to make sure that there is continuing education, right? Cyber workforce education. And that includes our K-12 and then higher education as well. So, and the other thing too is CISA works with a lot of other federal partners. So NSA actually has a grant program for the higher education as part of their National Cybersecurity Academic of Excellence, where part of that grant is to educate not just the public sector, but also private organizations on cybersecurity, right? So there's a lot of grants out there that's available, not just for the government, for local government and state and territories, right? But it's also open to the private entities to apply for, so that we can work together to try and educate the workforce, right? That's really where they're at. And if we start the education in the K-12 level, we are increasing the amount of cybersecurity workforce that's going to come in the future. I mean, granted, we need them now, right? But we're also trying to create that path so that in the future we'll have a lot more students that are interested in cyber, and we can fill those gaps.
Excellent. Well, I think that about wraps it up. Jenilyn, Frank, Rocky, Kenny, Chris, big mahalo from me to you. I know I learned a lot. Not only was it educational, but it was entertaining as well. So for the audience, thank you for joining us. Please, let's continue the conversation. Feel free to find us around the fringes. And aloha. Thank you.